Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. We're going to ask that everyone please mute yourself. We are live. Good morning and welcome to another amazing event. We are happy to have you here with us. And at this time, we are going to turn the mic over to today's Mistress of Ceremonies, Ruth Ann Page.
Thank you, Cheryl. Appreciate it. Welcome and good morning, everyone. So as introduced, my name is Ruth Ann Page, and it is once again my privilege and pleasure to serve as your Mistress of Ceremonies. Most importantly, I'd like to thank each of you for joining our annual health and wellness event today. And this is held during American Heart Month in February. It's co-sponsored by the Central Jersey Club of the National Association of Negro Business and Professional Women's Clubs. Yes, I know it's a mouthful. The Monmouth County Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, and Concerned Black Nurses of Central New Jersey. For those that are not aware, let me share some information about each of these dynamic organizations with you. So the Central Jersey Club has been in existence approaching 60 years this year. So feel free to use your icons as we do celebrate this year. And we have been offering quality community programming throughout those years. It's a dynamic group of over 50 members passionate about its commitment to improve the quality of life of the citizens within Monmouth and Ocean counties. For Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, having been founded in 1913, the Monmouth County Alumni Chapter has clearly distinguished itself as a public service organization that boldly confronts the challenges of African Americans and hence all Americans. Over the years, they've brought several public service initiatives to our communities. Concerned Black Nurses of Central New Jersey is a driving force that embraces and facilitates innovative health practices while providing education in underserved communities. These three organizations have partnered to bring awareness about heart disease and stroke to you. We're excited as we feel strongly that you'll find today's programming informative and enjoyable. So we invite you to use your reaction icons in Zoom to clap, laugh, love, celebrate all of our fantastic presenters today. We really, truly appreciate those in attendance because we know that you could be anywhere today, but you're spending your Saturday morning with us as we focus on getting back to the basics for heart health. So let's talk about it. If you're like me, now and then with hectic schedules, busy day-to-day activity, and life just lifing, quite honestly, we forget to take time out to care for ourselves. Well, today is that reminder. So give yourselves a round of applause for being here today, for taking time out for you and your heart health. So round of applause, please use your icons, put it in the chat. So why back to the basics? Well, as an example, how many of you consistently get 7 hours of sleep per night? Put it in the chat. How many of you get 7 hours of sleep? You can put a thumbs down icon if you'd like. Thumbs up if you're actually doing it. But I know I clearly do not. I see some items coming in the chat, yes. And on top of that, I see some of you are struggling with sleep, right? How many of you get 150 minutes of physical activity each week? So once again, let's hear that in the chat, because I already see some thumbs down, some wish that you coulds. So again, I know I'm guilty. I do not get 150 minutes of physical activity each week. I know that I should, but that's only half the battle, right? Knowing is the first half, doing is the second half, and most important. And just think, there are 10,080 minutes in a week. So adults just need 150 minutes of physical activity per week at a minimum, and that's only just over 1% of those 10,000 minutes. So back to the basics, because we need that reminder that we're worth that 1%. How many of you are worth that 1%? Put that in the chat. So to help us get back to those basics, we've prepared a wonderful program for you today with a keynote speaker, opportunities for questions and answers, heart healthy workshops, and even a few prizes. So now I have the honor of introducing our keynote speaker. So Dr. Marion Van Dyke Acquah, Assistant Professor of Medicine and Cardiology at Hackensack Meridian School of Medicine. Dr. Van Dyke Acquah will speak to getting back to the basics for heart health, which will be immediately followed by an audience Q&A, that means you, and that'll be a question and answer session that's moderated by Dr. Tanya Randall. You can ask your questions using the chat feature, or you may come on screen for a live question. We welcome you. Dr. Van Dyke is board certified in cardiovascular disease, nuclear cardiology, and echocardiography and coronary CTA. After her fellowship, she served as the director of outpatient cardiology of Mount Sinai Beth Israel downtown until moving to Hackensack University Medical Center in 2004. She provides patient-focused care and cardiac imaging for diverse patients in our community, often serving as a second opinion. She focuses on quality, teaching, and serves as a role model to many aspiring women in medicine. Her philosophy of care is compassionate and patient-focused. She believes in truly seeing the patient as a unique individual. Her greatest sense of satisfaction is her patients. She completely enjoys interacting with them, learning from them, partnering with them in their cardiac journey, and seeing them transition from one issue to being a healthy, knowledgeable cardiac patient while providing care that is just right for them. Now let's give a warm welcome to Dr. Van Dyke Acquah. Doctor, I turn the mic over to you.
Thank you so much, Ruth Ann.
Welcome.
Thank you for the very lovely introduction. I am very excited to be here today to be able to share a lot about getting back to the basics of heart health. If you would like me to proceed, I am going to share my screen and then we'll talk about heart health. All right, at the end, I know there'll be lots of questions. So at the end, we can maybe go back to a couple of slides if you have questions or anything like that, but let me know. Okay. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can. Thank you so much.
So I don't need this first slide because I think Ruth Ann introduced me, and thank you again. I'm very passionate about heart disease in women and also amongst the African-American female. This slide is from 2003, and this is the cover of Time magazine. And it's sad to say that over 20 years, we are almost at the same place. So we really need to put some more effort into it. You can see that at that time, the focus was more on the search for Saddam, and this was more of a surprise, which it should not be. So what is cardiovascular disease? I always like to explain to people I speak to and to patients that we are not only talking about heart attacks, because there are multiple things that come into play. Heart attacks, people walk around saying, I have angina, as though it is nothing of concern. Heart failure, there's sudden death, strokes, as we mentioned. It's cardiovascular disease encompasses the whole part of the body. Could be peripheral artery disease, that's in our legs. You've heard of people who had aneurysms. So if we separate these things out, I think we don't do it enough justice. So it's much better to consider cardiovascular disease so that we attack the whole spectrum. Now, these are the facts. It's the #1 killer of women. 1 in 3 women will have some form of cardiac event every 80 seconds. It kills or claims more lives than all the cancers combined. People often assume that breast cancer is the concern for women. Uterine cancer is becoming more common, by the way. But even when you combine all of them, heart disease trumps as the main concern. We all have risk factors. 90% of us will have at least one risk factor for heart disease. And the other concerning thing for women is that sometimes there are no warning signs, and the outcomes, if you have a first event, the outcomes are worse in women than in men. This is something that is not spoken about much at all. This is a couple slides on stroke, just so we are aware. Women have 60,000 more strokes than men. Native Americans have the highest prevalence. African Americans have twice as much as Caucasians. And then the Hispanics before the Caucasian population. However, all the risk factors that occur are the same for heart disease and stroke and tend to get worse as we get older. We are all aware that strokes are a leading cause of adult disability and a very costly healthcare issue in the US. It is #3, by the way. Now, why is this an issue? This slide is actually from 2016, and I just saw in the New York Times last week that we are almost at the same level of numbers. Only 45% of women are aware that heart disease is the #1 killer. Some people think that it's all tied to obesity, and so they're stigmatized and they do not want to present to a doctor's office to be evaluated. They try on their own to lose weight and think that that will resolve it, but it's not only obesity. A lot of patients go in for evaluations, and it's typically for breast cancer check or maybe getting their pap smear, but it's not advertised enough that you should have a heart screen. It's not one of the things we know about colonoscopy, mammography. I've not heard on the news that every couple of years or at any given age, you should be having your heart screened, believe it or not. A lot of doctors sometimes do not do this, and a lot of physicians don't routinely do this, especially in the African American women. So what are the risk factors? I think if we know ourselves, we'll know what to do. Generally, age on its own, about 55, is a risk factor. So that gives everybody one. And then if you go into detail, if you have a female under the age who had anything under the age of 60, or a male who had anything under the age of 50, it's a risk factor. But I'll talk a little bit about this. This changes a bit in the African American woman. Hypertension, cholesterol. You have to know the details of your cholesterol. Is it the bad or the good? Diabetes. Now, I throw this in here. It's called the metabolic syndrome, and it's for those people who are not quite diabetic. They're pre-diabetic, they have mild hypertension, they're obese. Sometimes that combination, without even being a diabetic per se, increases your heart risk. Kidney disease, smoking, clotting disorders, And I put this separate because now the most recent 2019 guidelines have added psychological stress and depression, post-traumatic stress disorder as a risk for heart disease. And these play more of a role in women. And inflammatory illnesses, SLE, Sjogren's, as we saw, are risk factors as well. Now, those were general facts. Now, these are facts specific to women. 44% of diabetic women, women are 44% more likely than men to have some cardiac events if they are diabetic. 44%, that's quite a lot. And when they do, it's often a silent event. I mentioned before that mental stress and depression tends to be more common in terms of the risk for women. We'll look at that. Smoking makes your risk higher, 25% higher than with men. And there's a high incidence of inactivity amongst women than men. Okay. Next slide. These are risk factors which are specific to women now. Menopause, early menopause has now been found to be a risk factor where women have a different type of heart risk where it affects mostly smaller vessels. We are increasing seeing that in women who have complications during pregnancy, like high blood pressure, diabetes, preeclampsia, preterm deliveries, they have to be watched closely because we see that they, in the long term, will develop hypertension and sometimes diabetes. Family history is a bigger factor for women, and we mentioned the inflammatory illnesses being more of a risk in women than men. So this is now how they should be talking about risk factors. There's the common regular ones, which are now, we noticed, have depression and stress. And then there's this other ones on the side, preterm delivery, gestational hypertension, preeclampsia, autoimmune disorders that are unique risk factors in women and tend to affect the younger woman and also tend to affect the African-American woman more, that we should be educating physicians, cardiologists, and everyone about so that they are aware of. Stress, I mentioned psychological stress. What is stress? It is a combination of a feeling of depression, anxiety, sometimes anger, hostility. All those factors have been shown based on the mind-heart connection to contribute to cardiovascular disease. So we said this. Sounds scary that at least 90% of us will have one risk factor. But the good news is that cardiovascular disease is actually one of the most preventable illnesses. 80% of heart disease and stroke can be prevented through lifestyle change. That's a fact that is commonly missed. Now, how do we go about this lifestyle change? This is the new guideline that came out from the American Heart 2022. Used to be 7, and I'm very happy that you asked about sleep. Now we deal with life's essential 8s. So we added sleep. I'll talk about each of them in detail. So if you want to remember, it's 4 healthy behaviors and 4 healthy factors. That's how we come by our 8. The healthy behaviors: eating, fitness, smoking cessation or quitting nicotine, and sleep. These are behaviors that we should all invest in. And then we'll talk about weight, obesity, cholesterol, diabetes, and blood pressure. So let's talk about the behaviors first. Smoking. What does smoking do to the heart? When we smoke, our good cholesterol goes down. Your blood pressure goes up. You're at risk for irregular heartbeats. And most people who have a heart attack are more likely to have smoked within an hour. It puts women at a higher risk. But I always like to emphasize the good news. Once we quit, By 10 to 14 years, your risk is about that of a non-smoker. And in 2 years, you've lowered your risk by 1/3. So it's never too late to quit. The American Heart and many communities, I'm sure Hackensack Meridian, all hospitals now have support systems for smoking cessation, because it is the #1 preventable thing that we can all do to prevent heart disease and, of course, certain malignancies. I just want to point out one thing, that e-cigarettes, other tobacco products, vapes, and everything else they put in the appliances used now by a lot of the young adults increase your risk. We are seeing a crisis of young adults who will grow up to have more heart disease because it's not very easy for them to quit. This is an interesting statistic. Half of America's children ages between 3 and 11 are exposed to secondhand smoke. So what can we do? If you smoke, you really have to have a plan. You set a date, you choose the method, you decide how you're going to do it. You partner with somebody, healthcare professional, call a number. If you don't know, the heart.org has a lot of resources. You prepare for it and you quit on that day. 1-800-QUIT now is available for anybody to use. Does not matter where you are located. Now, diet. As we can see, this is a large study out of Sweden. They looked at 25,000 women, and they looked at women who consumed a high amount of fruits, vegetables, grains, legumes, and fish. So 5 is the guys who consumed a lot of it, and 1 is the folks that consumed very little of it. Having a heart attack, those who consumed a lot of it were able to cut their risk down in 2, half, from 1.8 to almost nothing. This is when you correct for all other risk factors. So just what we eat alone, forget hypertension, diabetes, everything else. What we eat alone, if you're having the highest consumption daily of these items, you immediately lower your risk for heart attack if you're a woman. So what's the guideline says how to eat better? I reviewed it. I think I have a slide that has more detail, but vegetables, fruits, whole grains, beans, legumes, plant-based proteins, lean animal proteins, skinless poultry, fish, and seafood. I actually don't like this because a lot of folks tend to have a lot of shrimp, which is high in cholesterol. So focus mostly on the marine fishes. Those that are rich in omega-3s. Limit all these other items as much as you can: processed, red meat, refined carbohydrates, and definitely avoid all the trans fats and the hydrogenated fats, all the things we find in foods we actually like to eat, baked foods and fried foods. Look, when you go shopping, there is always now a label on a lot of foods. See if it has the heart check. Try to cook a lot at home if you can. There's American Heart website, has a bunch of recipes that you can use to make sure that you are complying with these requirements. So these are the things we talked about. 5 cups a day of foods that are non-canned, non-added sugar, genuine fresh fruits and vegetables, if you can. Frozen might be acceptable, but if you can do mostly fresh, that should be where you go. 3.5 ounces of whole grain, as much as you can. Bulgur, oatmeal, fish we talked about. This is the added sugar. This is under 450 a week. I know people who do 450 a day. It's under 450 a week. Sodium, and as we talked about, omega-3s are not only helpful for heart risk, but also for the brain and your your risk for stroke. It's found that 90% of US adults are deficient in omega-3 in their diets, and it's been linked to dementia and depression. Next is exercise. And I know we're always concerned if we have time. So I wanted to show you guys this. Walking is okay. This is an old study from the New England Journal of Medicine from 1999. And they just show that anybody who is able to walk 3 or more hours a week, which is not a lot, can really replace, when you compare it with other types of physical exercise, such as going to the gym, treadmill, etc., you can still have that relative benefits. Again, everything is cutting most things either by 30%, close to half your risk if you do any of these things, which is substantial. There are not a lot of things that lower things by 30%. Even aspirin and statins, these behaviors do as much as those things do, but we don't do them. This is the American Heart recommendation. I just want to remind us that this is minimum. Moderate exercise, 150, as we spoke about, and it could be anything: dancing, gardening, aerobics, vigorous exercise. If you do vigorous exercise, you can do less time. So there's a benefit. You should add some strength training at least twice a week, which would be weights, resistance. Now we have things like bar, Pilates that can help as well. If you are able to do double this, it's been shown that your benefit is exponential as you double the amount you do. Sit less. Sitting is the new smoking. And this I find very important to share with us, because we also control what happens amongst kids. And the recommendation is to have 60 minutes a day. For them, it's actually higher requirements. And we have to make sure this happens before they become young adults. So in summary, you have to set some goals, plan it, keep doing it. As I showed you, walking is effective as any type of exercise if you're able to do more than 3 hours a week. Now, this is brand new. I think I caught this in December. And a lot of my patients ask me, what about all those steps? Yes, this clearly shows when it comes to all-cause mortality or cardiovascular risk, fatal or non-fatal. And here you can see people doing steps a day. Again, I told you it's about cutting things in half. Here you see that if you're able to do 10,000 steps a day, you lower all-cause mortality as well as death significantly. Now, so we see here that 2,000 to 3,000 is the minimum, but if you can get 8, 7, I think that for busy women, if you find some device you can put on your wrist or your hip and just do it every day and try to aim for 8 to 10,000 steps a day, you do yourself a lot of service. Now, apart from cutting your cardiovascular risk in half, it combines all the things we are doing, because it releases stress, puts you in a better mood, makes it easier for you to quit smoking, it suppresses your exercise, takes care of your weight. I mean, there's so many benefits of exercise. Lowers your blood pressure, raises the good HDL, controls blood sugar, gives you better quality sleep. This is a very big one. And of course, makes you look great and makes you feel good about yourself. So you can't not exercise. Now we talked about sleep. This is very crucial, not only the duration, but often the type of sleep. We've seen sleep affecting cardiovascular disease, cognitive decline, depression, dementia. Poor sleep is tied to diabetes, high blood pressure, and it's a very simple thing. So what can we do Look at the time, set proper alarms, plan everything, okay? Make it a quiet room, no devices. Use special lighting if you need to. You can use music, special music that makes you sleep easier. Set the alarms so that they don't set it at a time you are not going to wake up and then spend an hour hitting the snooze button. That actually is bad for you. Next, we finished the 4 behaviors: sleep, smoking, exercise, and eating. If we do all of them, what we are trying to get rid of are these 4 factors. So what are the 4 factors? Obesity. Here we have 30% increase in heart disease risk for every 5 units increase in BMI. So this is what we call BMI. We get your weight in kilos divided by your height in meters squared. Ideal BMI is 25. Over 25, it's overweight. And then obesity, morbid obesity, higher than that is worse. The good news is, if you know your number and you are able to lower your BMI by 5, each 5 contributes to worse outcome. If you lower by 5, your risk will go lower. Same concept, mortality amongst women and BMI. The higher the BMI, the higher the mortality. This is 2 maps from the United States of patients who just reported their weights. On the left, we have non-Hispanic white adults, and on the right, we have non-Hispanic Black adults. And you can see that all across the United States. The dark brown is the BMI greater than 35. We have within the African American population the highest and diffuse evidence of high BMI. What can we do? We have to manage our weights. It's not very simple, but at the same time, it is quite simple. Start comparing how many calories are getting in compared to how many calories are getting out. You have to have less in than what you can put out. So do a food journal. When you exercise, pay attention into how many calories you burned. Now, the easiest thing to do to have low caloric intake is to just focus on the big things: vegetables, whole grains, beans, legumes, nuts, and plant-based proteins. Generally, a green Mediterranean diet is what most of us will advocate for. Portion size. It's a big one and an easy one to get rid of. If you cut your portion in half and replace that half with greens, you've made a big dent already. And of course, as I mentioned, you got to burn the calories. Next is diabetes. Very scary one, because in women, the risk for heart disease is 6-fold. If you have diabetes versus a woman who does not have diabetes, this is the curve. It's very separate. Mortality per 1,000 is 6 times if you have diabetes and if you don't have diabetes. So it's something we really want to completely avoid or not have at all. We can. Similar slide, more powerful in women. What can you do? If you are diabetic, you probably all know this, know what your A1C is. You want it to be less than 6.5. If you are not diabetic, you want to make sure it never gets anywhere close to 6.5. And the normal is 5.6, actually. Again, the concepts are the same. Eat smart, move more, manage the weight. sleep better, know your numbers. Very important. When you go for your physical, ask the doctor, what's my glucose? What's my A1C? Blood pressure. That's extremely common. And it's one of the, after smoking, it's one of the ones that if we control makes the biggest impact. It lowers your risk for stroke by 40% if you have low blood pressure. Heart attack by 25%. And heart failure, something that we don't talk about a lot of, by 50%. We focus a lot about heart failure when the patient has been in the hospital. But we should even be preventing heart failure much more. It's actually one of the easier things to prevent. Control blood pressure. What is normal blood pressure? There is nothing about when you are older, your blood pressure is supposed to be elevated. Normal blood pressure is 120/80. Patients who have blood pressure around here, 120 to 129, 80, haven't been labeled as hypertensive, but they have elevated blood pressure. And this is the time where you want to be super active and super vigilant. Once your blood pressure is above 130, you have stage 1 hypertension, and 140 stage 2, and much higher. Age and family history do play a part, but that does not mean that we have to accept that, oh, my father had high blood pressure, so I will have high blood pressure. Doesn't mean that we cannot avoid it. Doesn't mean that we should not attack it. So this is the Life Simple 8 guideline. I showed you this already. Under 120/80 if you can. The interesting thing is that the factors are the things, the behaviors keep showing up. Eat smart, move more, manage weight, don't smoke, sleep well. Cholesterol, something that we should pay close attention to. Know your numbers. Know the difference between the good and the bad. Is my good high? Is my bad low? Don't only know the total and the number, and don't only say, I don't like when patients say, well, cholesterol is just borderline. I'm not sure what that means. Ask the doctor to give you much more details. If you are prescribed medication, then oftentimes it's at a level where you need treatment. Stress. I really think that they should make it Life Simple 9s, because in women, this plays a big role and it's not attacked as much as it should. This is a study from a 1998 World Soccer game, and you could clearly see that when, I think in England, this is a British study, when the English team lost to Argentina, they had multiple heart attacks in the first couple of days. In women, stress completely makes us vulnerable and increases the impact for heart disease. There are a couple of reasons why, and I mentioned a few. We tend to eat bad things when we are stressed. We tend to have higher blood pressures. People smoke with stress. And then there's the biology of stress as well. It tends to affect more younger women. There's something called stress cardiomyopathy, where people will be rushed to the emergency room with a weak heart, more common in women. And it can cause a heart attack, as simple. It causes the clots to move from an artery when you are very stressed with all that catecholamine, and can just immediately cause a heart attack or a stroke. What can we do to manage stress? We've talked about sleep. We can't talk a lot more about sleep. A sound sleep, it affects your mood, your mental awareness, your physical, your energy level, your health, exercise. But I think it's also important that we learn about relaxation techniques like Tai Chi, meditation, deep breathing exercises. Try to take a yoga class sometimes. Learn some time management skills with work and family. Use family support systems as much as possible. Make a plan. Don't just assume that this is how life is supposed to be. And take time out to nurture yourself. Do things like a day spa, massage. Spend time, psychologically treating yourself. When we go to the doctor, we should ask about your risk score. It's called a global risk score. And all women, each time at each physical, there is a calculation that the doctor should use based on your race, diabetes, hypertension, etc. And then they come up with a number. Identify whether you are high risk or not. If you are they are not sure, sometimes they will do certain things like a calcium score or do certain blood work that can guide us to see who we should be much more aggressive with. And this is something you should always ask about. We need to be our own heroes. We need to listen to ourselves for symptoms. The symptoms for a heart attack in a woman might be a little bit different. It could be arm, neck, or jaw pain. It might not be as classic. Chest pain is still the common type, don't get me wrong, but it could be other things, such as just unusual shortness of breath, sometimes dizziness, unusual nausea, cold sweats, unexplained tiredness. Listen to yourself. If you find strange symptoms, please go to the emergency room. And as I mentioned, we are looking at what we call the risk factors unique to women. Discuss this when you go for your GYN visits. What's my risk for heart disease? What should I be doing different? Now, I have this slide in here because I think that we as mothers, women, need to make sure the process starts early, even before your delivery. When you're pregnant, the health activities at that level will affect what happens to you long term. Early childhood and at the level of adolescence, the school lunches, participating in what's going on at that level plays a big role. Young adults, very stressed, young children, eat poorly, sleep poorly. We need to get the word out there before it becomes a middle-aged or an advanced aged condition. And lastly, I usually speak about the social determinants of health, but I just have one slide today because I just want us to understand that a lot of what happens in our body clinically, what's happening in the doctor's office, is about 20% when it comes to the African American population and our outcomes. 80% of what's happening is determined by social determinants, like things in our physical environment, access to good, healthy food sources, financial security, ability to exercise, and a safe environment where you can go run out in the gym. And these things also need to be addressed in order to make a dent in the future of heart disease, both in women and in the African American community. So that's it. I think that's my last. Oh, wait, I have one more slide. Similar to what I was talking about, we talk about risk factor modification in detail, focus on psychological stresses. Now the American Heart Association is identifying things that need to be done outside just telling the person, eat better. We have to start checking on health literacy. Do they actually understand what we are saying? What portion size means? What is whole grain? Use pictures when you are talking to people, with the nurses amongst you. We need to increase health literacy because that is a barrier. We talked about the neighborhood and the environment. And I think that those things should be brought to the forefront if we're going to make a difference. When you talk about smoking cessation, make sure in the area or the person you're talking to has access to counseling program, a social group. And that's it. So I will stop sharing my slides and get back to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was a great speech. That was a great talk. There were some questions that came through the chat. So I'm going to start to go through those. I'm Dr. Tanya Randall. I will be your moderator for today. One of the first questions was, if you're allergic to fish, how do you get enough omega-3s?
Very good question. There are many sources that are actually plant-based and from nuts, almonds, walnuts. We have all the healthy nuts. You can get it out by having a lot more olive oil based, extra virgin olive oil based. Most people might be allergic to shellfish, but they can have salmon, sardines, tuna, other fishes. Actually, it's been shown that eggs are also a source of omega-3. So do your research. There are many other sources outside fish that you could have.
If someone is allergic to fish, aren't there also algae-based omega-3s? Would they be allergic to the algae-based omega-3s also if they're allergic to fish?
Not necessarily. I mean, I recently actually went to an allergist for myself, which is something that we don't do enough of. They can immediately assess you and show you whether you are or are not, because people tend to say they're allergic to many things, and it's actually not as accurate. So there's a very good question. It's very important to distinguish what exactly is the allergy, what are your IgE levels, is this safe to eat? But like I said, you will have exactly plant sources of omega-3 that you could have as well.
Okay. The next question is there a difference in heart disease with storing fat in your abdomen versus storing fat in your hips?
Very good question. Yes, abdominal fat, or what we call increased abdominal girth, or what we call a waist-hip ratio. If you have a high waist-hip ratio, your risk for metabolic syndrome and heart disease is much higher. So when you talk about the BMI, yes, it's important to look at what's encompassing. Is it mostly muscle? Are you somebody who exercises a lot? So you cannot look at any of these factors individually. You should look at all the 4 factors and see what you can do at each point to lower your risk. But increased abdominal girth, that is a big waist circumference, it's a higher risk for heart disease than when it's in the thighs.
Okay, thank you. Next question. If you're under the age of 55, how often should you check your heart health?
Honestly, I recommend that everybody has an annual physical. Does not matter how old you are. We see a lot of heart disease even in 30s, 35, 40, 45. So as you go for your physical, you should discuss with your primary care physician the baseline assessment for your heart risk. What is your score? Are you at 10%? And at that level, if there's a question, they may refer you for a cardiologist to get a more detailed assessment.
Okay. Earlier in your talk, you spoke about a heart screen. What tests would you recommend in a heart screen? And is that something that should be done for people in their 20s or as they get older?
So I don't know if there's something called the ASCVD score. And it takes into consideration, they give a score for each item: your race, your sex, your do you have hypertension or not? Are you on blood pressure medications? Do you have diabetes? Do you have a smoking history? Those things are helpful. However, when it comes to the African American population, those things may differ. There might be a higher score if you are Black versus if you are Hispanic. So the physician will do these things first. Check your cholesterol level. Make sure you don't have diabetes or pre-diabetes. Check your blood pressure. Once all those things are done, sometimes we do things such as a calcium score. It's a very simple test that has been shown in people who are not aware that they have heart disease. It assesses whether you are at risk of a major event or not. You get a number that is less than 100. It's a simple CAT scan done in most facilities now. Unfortunately, we don't have enough support in insurance companies for prevention, but it's relatively cheap. And you can get a number, a simple score. Calcium score is something that I would do. But just having the conversation with a physician, knowing your numbers, what's your HDL, what's your LDL, what's your A1C, those are the things. There's no single test that you just go and get a scan like the mammogram. It's a global risk assessment.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question, maybe. There's been a lot of talk about the new, like Ozempic and Mounjaro and all of those medications that treat diabetes, but also help you lose the weight. Have you seen, I mean, I guess it's relatively new, but have you seen a real decrease in risk of heart disease with those, or what's the?
So we are seeing a lot benefit in heart failure. Like you said, the studies originally started with heart failure, but anything that you can do to make you non-diabetic, lower your blood pressure, will ultimately lower your risk for heart disease. If you have generally tried all the resources and all the things that you can do, and you are at high risk for diabetes or heart disease, it would be something that I think that should be discussed with your physician and considered. You have to know, though, that you also have to be part of the plan. Are you going to do this long term? Do you just want a boost and then you're going to stop? I mean, I personally think that if we have enough awareness early on in life, we can take on those 4 habits aggressively. But yes, there is likely going to be studies coming out showing the benefits. It's the cost. It's unfortunately, they are expensive. They are often not covered, and there's a shortage now because people are siphoning them out for cosmetic reasons.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to turn the program over back to Ruth Ann Page. And thank you so much. It was very informative. I love the talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Van Dyke-Acquah, for sharing all of your knowledge and leaving us with gems of information on the basis of heart health. I mean, that was diamonds, pearls, emeralds, rubies, all sorts of gems of information. So thank you once again, and round of applause. So everyone, please feel free again to use your icons, put comments in the chat, because we really do appreciate all the information that was shared today. And especially thanks to Dr. Randall as well for moderating the questions and answers segment of this portion of the program. So an important part of this type of program is not just to listen, but to act. So as Dr. Van Dyke-Acquah indicated, make a plan, especially since so many heart disease and stroke risk factors are preventable. So we trust that each of you have received at least one, if not many more takeaways. So with that, how can you get back to the basics to improve your heart health? We'd love to hear from you. Please continue to place your comments in the chat. I know that so many have already been placed in the chat, but we want to make sure we know that this program is valuable to you. So we'd love to hear what your takeaways are. And I mean, I heard plenty, right? So more exercise, techniques to get more or better sleep, right? Quit smoking, add or replace items on your plate with more vegetables. And also importantly, to advocate for yourself to get a heart health screening. So what's your takeaway? Please place it in the chat. And as you place that in the chat, we'll now have our first gift card raffle for which there will be 2 winners. This is so this will be for all of you who have registered for today's program and on the Zoom event. For those who registered by 8:30 this morning, you are eligible to win. So each winner will be contacted with the information you used to register. This will be followed by our first workshop on benefits of working out for heart health. And that will be presented by Adriana Boucher, a doctor of physical therapy, who specializes in an outpatient orthopedic setting. So again, you will have the opportunity to ask questions that will also be facilitated by Dr. Randall. Now, good luck, and let's spin that wheel. All right, our first winner, Ebony Lawrence Smith. Congratulations. Pamela Cofield, congratulations as our second winner of the day. So congratulations to both Ebony and Pamela. Congratulations again.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Okay, now we're going to turn over for our next workshop with Adriana Boucher.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thank you so much, Ruth Ann, for the introduction. And special thank you to Mary Flannelly for introducing me to this and inviting me to this great seminar. This is really great. I'm excited to share with you all some simple basic exercises that we can go through together. I have some videos provided, also some benefits to the exercise, and how we can continue to improve that heart health and physical activity.
We're getting the presentation up right now. 1 second.
No problem. No problem. And while we're waiting for that, if any of the participants have any questions for me during the presentation, just write it in the chat. If I'll try to provide some modifications based on what level of activity is most comfortable for you all. Okay. Beautiful. So we're gonna go over just the benefits of weight training, heart health here. So this first introductory slide just goes over the five, there's plenty of benefits, right, to just exercise, but this first slide really tackles the 5 major benefits of a warm-up prior to a short exercise session. Okay, so before each of my patients or clients, I like to do a simple, very easy warm up. Okay, so the benefits of this warm up are to simply increase your heart rate, get your blood pumping, improves flexibility and activation of the muscles that you're trying to work. And again, increasing that blood flow so you're not jumping into exercise with some cold muscles. You're really getting the blood pumping and the heart going. Also increases serotonin levels, right? We love that because serotonin is a chemical in the brain that actually releases happiness. So that's been shown with exercise as well. And again, it's a good preparation for activity and working on the cardiovascular system to warm up prior to the exercise. Okay, so as you can see here, this is a scale that is commonly used for physical activity. We use it in physical therapy very often. It's called a rating of perceived exertion scale. Okay, so this scale is measured from 1 to 10. 1 means you're not really exerting much energy. Okay, so a quick definition of exertion is your effort to physical activity. So this is a measurement that you can do while you're doing your exercise program. Again, 1 being at rest. As you can see here, 2, 3, 4, as it increases, your exertion gets more. So 10 being maximal. I recommend that you should never be at a 9 or 10. Okay. I usually say a good comfortable range would be 3 to 5. So that easy to challenging phase. You want to feel like you're getting good physical exertion and physical effort and your heart is pumping, but again, not so much where it's in that orange to red zone. Okay. So a few points I have written here are monitoring your vitals and oxygen with this scale. So if you're someone who has high blood pressure, low blood pressure, get very short of breath easily, okay, you can use this scale to monitor that. If you have a blood pressure cuff at home, if you have a little oxygen meter to check your oxygen, that's very important to consider as well. This last point that I have written here, this is a very easy technique that you all can use during your exercise session. It's called pursed lip breathing. Okay, so this is a breathing technique that is best researched to optimize your oxygen uptake. Okay, so how you do the pursed lip breathing is you breathe in through the nose with a count of 5. You hold it for about 2 to 3 seconds, and then you breathe out with pursed lips. So the pursed lips is actually like you're blowing into a balloon like this. So if it's very similar to like a meditation technique, slowing down the nervous system and getting your heart rate to slow down as well. So if you're using this scale as you're exercising, you can use the breathing technique while you're exercising. I always tell my patients and clients, you have to keep breathing. You should not strain or Valsalva, hold your breath while you're exercising. So these are just a few points to monitor before you get or during your session. Okay, so here's just a simple slide. Again, there's so many that you can incorporate based on your physical activity level, but these are a few warm-up exercises that I had mentioned for the upper and the lower body. Okay, so upper body, the first point here, arm raises out to the side. Okay, shoulder rolls back and forth, and then just elevated arm raises in this direction. Again, you can do both of these exercises either seated or standing, depending on what's more comfortable for you. Lower body exercises, some ankle raises, seated marches. Again, the purpose of the warm-up is to get the blood flowing, get your heart rate a little bit elevated to prep you for the session. Okay, so you can see me here. I am demonstrating this first exercise. Okay, so this is called an upper body exercise. Upper body entails the trunk and above. Okay, so you can see here I'm using really my shoulders and my elbows. And I just grab some 2-pound light weights here. Again, if you want to go lighter, I would say between 1 to 3 pounds. So this exercise here, it's a standing arm curl shoulder press. Again, you could do this exercise seated or standing. I recommend 2 sets of 10 reps. So what that means is you do the exercise 10 times and then take a short break and then another 10 reps. Okay, so 2 sets of 10. You can add weight or no weight. The main muscles that are being targeted with this type of movement are your bicep muscles, so the muscle right here, and your shoulder muscles. Okay, so this is kind of like a multi-dynamic movement where you're working different areas or different muscles. This next one here is great for posture. Okay, so again, seated or standing. It's called a T with a shoulder squeeze. So you can see here as I turn around, my shoulder blades are squeezing together. And again, you could do it seated or standing. I love this one. It's really great for posture. So it's also going to help open up your chest, okay, for better breathing, better posture. And this really works your shoulder blade muscles. So those 2 big triangle bones in your back. And again, targets your shoulders as well. So this is a great one for posture. I really love to do this one as well. You can do it with or without weights. Okay, now we're going to go to the lower body. Okay, so lower body exercise really entails the trunk or below. This one is great. You're going to kick out and bring the leg out to the side. I know I'm going a little faster here, but you can go at a slow rhythmic pace. The most important thing you want to think about with all these exercises is technique and control. Okay, that's how you're going to get the most activation of the muscles, the most benefit. So again, 2 sets of 10 repetitions, take a little break, another set. Okay, and again, if you guys have questions about prescription or sets, reps, just type that in the chat. This exercise particularly works the quad muscles, so the muscle on top of the thigh, and your butt muscles. Okay, those are very, very important for walking, stairs, getting up from a chair. Okay, getting up from a chair. As we age, there's a lot of research that shows that ability declines. So we want to be able to work on that, and the next exercise actually will show that type of movement. Okay, so you can see here I'm standing from an elevated surface, sit to stand. Very simple. Okay, arms, I like the arms crossed, so you don't use the arms. Okay, another way you can do this is arms straight out and a little bit of a mini squat there. I suggest that you hold on to something, okay, that you hold on to a counter or a bar in front of you just for safety purposes. Again, this works the quad muscles, the calves, the glute muscles, your butt muscles, and your core as well, okay? All of these exercises are very easy to do, very, very simple, should not, you can run through a few examples of them, but as the doctor mentioned previously, 20 to 30 minutes a day is very crucial for heart health. Okay, so again, this exercise, 2 sets of 10. You can add some weights in the arms, or you can just start with the movement itself. So I emphasize this type of movement for sure with most of my patients, because this is a functional movement. And what that means is function is anything we really do daily: stairs, walking, getting up from a chair. So this is something simple that you can do and modify a little bit. Okay, and that's pretty much it. I know this was very a basic example here, but again, if write your questions in the chat. If you have any questions here or any, I see I'm pulling up some now. If there's any modifications that you have questions on, please feel free to write it in the chat. Okay, I'm going through the questions here. Did you know when you feel short of breath, pursed lip breathing helps get more oxygen into your lungs and calms you down so you can better control your breath? Great point. So let me add on to that a little bit. When you hold your breath, there's two parts of your nervous system, we call it. So if you've ever felt a lot of anxiety or a lot of panic, that is the same type of system that amplifies or occurs when you hold your breath. And when you hold your breath, you don't get enough oxygen to your lungs. And then that can create blood pressure issues, lack of oxygen, heart issues, things such as that. Another comment, I always hold my breath when lifting and doing exercise. I have no idea why. Typically, when we exercise, we focus so much on the movement, we forget to breathe. That is typically the reason why people hold their breath, is because they're trying to lift, and then they're like, oh, I'm not breathing. So really taking a pause between the movement and between the exercise and saying to yourself, let me just work on my breathing first. What I like to use is an inhale, exhale. So when you go through the movement, I'll give an example. With the squat, or the sit to stand, if you're squatting down, you should breathe in. And when you stand up, you should breathe out. So just breathing in while you're going into the movement, breathing out while you're coming out of the movement. So that's just a technique I like to use. Does the lower body exercise help with mobility and reduce the incidence of falling? Absolutely. Okay, so as we age, unfortunately, the risk of fall increases. So not only does exercise benefit your heart health, right? But it benefits your risk for fall, okay? There is also a higher incidence of falls after one fall happens. So you are less likely to perform exercise. You lack confidence in going out places and social events, right? So doing exercise is going to help improve all of those things, okay? Lower body exercise helps with mobility, but it also helps with strengthening, okay? If we don't have good strength in our legs, we are not going to feel as confident walking, as confident balance, right? If you're someone who lives home alone, your children or your loved ones are probably scared that you're going to maybe have a fall or have an incident where you're, home alone and you have an injury. So it's very important to do these exercises and do these things to prevent that. Suggestions other than squats: bothers my knees. This is a great one. So instead of the squats, you can do the seated kickouts, okay? And you can also lie onto your back and do something called bridges. So where you lift your bottom up and down, that works your glute muscles as well. So it's essentially working the same muscles. There's a lot of people who deal with arthritis in the knees or a lot of inflammation in the knees. So really a lot of pressure bothers them. So you can lie onto your back and try the bridges or the seated knee kickouts. If the depth, so how low you squat, is uncomfortable for you, you can just start with little pulses, right? You can just stay standing, squat down a little bit, stand up, squat down a little bit, stand up. Okay. This next question, great points, too many hold our breath while exercising. Absolutely. I see it all the
The
time.
next question is, should you avoid exercising if your blood pressure is high, say around 180 over 100?
Yes, I mean, the first suggestion I would make is try to get in consult and contact your cardiologist. If you were a patient of mine and came into the clinic, and that was your blood pressure, we probably would not exercise that day. So I would get that under control first. Because exercise can increase the blood pressure depending on what exercise. So we wouldn't do anything strenuous with someone's blood pressure that high. But again, that's definitely higher end of the spectrum. So I would get that under control first with diet, water intake, stress control, and then we could exercise there.
Another question was, what is a good exercise for people who have back pain?
So I say this answer a lot, but it depends. It really depends on where the back pain is coming from, how high the back pain is, how long the back pain has been occurring. So if it's a back pain that's really just been chronic and not super irritable, there's a lot of good hip strengthening exercises that you can do. So the bridges, excuse me, that I mentioned, lying on your back, picking the hips up and then down, driving through the feet. So it's called a bridge exercise. Something else I like to do too is knee to chest. So if you're lying on your back, you bring the knee in towards your chest, kind of like a stretching technique. So I can type these in the chat as well in response to that question, so you could look them up.
Okay. How can you strengthen your abs without doing sit-ups?
Good question, Mary. I do not like sit-ups personally. I think they actually do a little bit more harm to the back. That's my personal opinion. I've seen a lot of people with back pain come in and found out that they do a lot of sit-ups. So something you could do to strengthen the abs, right? The core encompasses the back and the hips too. So it's not just about strengthening your abs. You want to strengthen the hips and your low back. So something I like to do to strengthen the abs, leg raises, right? If you're lying all the way on your back, like you're lying in the bed, you keep your leg all the way straight and you raise it up and down. So that, if you keep your core nice and tight while you do that, that's going to strengthen your abs a little bit more. Bridges also strengthen your abs. You can sit in a chair and bring your arms out in front of you and do like rotations this way, like twists. That's going to help strengthen your abs as well. You can add some weights in your arms and do it that way too.
Next question is, everyone knows the benefits of sort of running and those type of aerobic exercises for heart health, but what are the benefits of weightlifting for heart health and doing like strength exercises?
Yep. So the benefits of weightlifting is for heart health is especially like lower body, our muscles are bigger. So it helps when we work out our lower body, it helps improve muscle mass and the upper body as well. That increases oxygen to the muscles. So if you increase oxygen to the muscles as well, you're going to increase oxygen to the whole body. Your vascular supply is going to be better. So your blood is going to pump much more. When we exercise, our blood circulates much better. So you're going to get better blood to the heart and the organs. If you're not moving as well, your blood's not going to be pumping and circulating as effectively. So your heart may not get the oxygen or the nutrition that it needs as effectively. So weight training also helps reduce the risk of bone conditions such as osteoporosis, osteoarthritis. Okay, a lot of us go through that as well. So bone too is just as important as the heart health because both of them need blood supply, and the weight training is going to help pump blood supply specifically to the muscle to help the muscle grow. But our heart is a muscle too. So we need to do weight training to strengthen and work our heart so our heart can beat and our heart rate can raise up so that muscle can become stronger. It's just as effective as if you were to lift and resist, your shoulder muscle. Your heart has to pump and build as well.
Is it as effective to work out with weights as it is to work out with bands?
So it's the same effect. I mean, weights are considered like a free weight. So essentially you're doing a separate movement, but a resistance band, you're actually getting resistance and increase in resistance through the movement. When I have a 2-pound dumbbell, the resistance stays the same because it's just 2 pounds. When I have a resistance band, the more I pull, the stretch makes it more resistance. So essentially it's going to get a little harder, but again, it's the same benefit. There's really not much difference between lifting with a dumbbell and a resistance band. I usually give resistance bands to people who maybe have a hard time gripping, or people who maybe can only handle light weight. A resistance band is going to help them control that weight better.
Okay.
Mhm.
I don't think any other questions have come through the chat. Thank you very much for your time.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Thank you so
Do
much.
you have
for
anything
having
else
me.
you want to add before I turn the program back over to Ruth Ann?
So yeah, so if anyone has any further questions, just type them in the chat. I'll continue being in here. But if anyone wants examples of exercises, or if you guys feel that you need a little bit more training, our clinic is located in Eatontown, New Jersey, and the information's up on the bio as well. So if you guys ever want to reach out, or if any of the participants has any further questions, just let me know.
All right. Well, thank you for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Boucher and Dr. Randall. Dr. Boucher, really appreciate the movement techniques and information, including the safety component, which is so important.
Absolutely.
I mean, I have some back and health concerns myself and was doing some of the exercises while you were talking, and I felt a little relief. So this is just another great reminder to get back to the basics. Another round of applause. So again, use your icons, place it in the chat. I'll keep asking for that feel-good feeling, which is also good for the heart. I mean, I don't know if that's clinical, but it sure makes my heart feel good. So now we'll have our second and final raffle with 2 winners, followed by our second and last workshop featuring heart healthy cooking for the busy woman. That's going to be presented by Jennifer Klein, who we have the pleasure of her sharing a great visual and informational experience with us. There will be question and answer session, also facilitated by Dr. Randall. And so just a little bit of information about Jennifer. Jennifer is a registered dietitian nutritionist with Monmouth Medical Center's Live Well Center, and that's located in Eatontown. Jennifer earned her degree in food and nutrition sciences from Montclair State University, her master's degree at the George Washington University, where she studied exercise, nutrition, and eating behaviors. And she completed her dietetic internship through the College of St. Elizabeth. We're pleased to have her here with us again. But before she gets started, let's once again spin that wheel. Janet Lawrence, congratulations. All right, we'll go on to our second winner. Let's spin that wheel again. Tracy Smith Tinson. Congratulations, Tracy, as our second winner for this round. So congratulations to both Janet and Tracy. And now we will move forward with our next workshop. Turn it over to Jennifer.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me as one of your presenters today. I hope everyone's having a great time so far. I know I've learned some great information so far. and welcome to our kitchen here at the Live Well Center. So before I get into the cooking demonstration that I'm going to share with you this morning, I'll just tell you really briefly who I am and what I do. As mentioned, my name is Jennifer Klein. I am a registered dietitian here with Monmouth Medical Center's Live Well Center. So the Live Well Center is located in Eatontown. We are part of Monmouth Medical Center's Community Health Department. So here at our center, we offer all free health and nutrition education programming. So community members of all ages can come into our center and participate in our free programs, which consist of things like physician lectures, workshops, support groups, movement classes. And here in our demonstration kitchen, this is part of our nutrition education programming. I always like to say that in our demonstration kitchen, we like to put good nutrition into practice. So instead of just telling you eat more fruits and vegetables, incorporate salmon into your lifestyle, we show you how to do that easily with some simple and delicious recipes. So today I'm going to share a recipe with you that incorporates a little bit of heart health and a lot of flavor. So we're going to be making today a salmon panzanella salad. So if you're unfamiliar with panzanella salad, a traditional panzanella is a bread salad, which I know sounds a little funny, but it's typically a toasted bread salad, so sort of like croutons, along with some fresh tomatoes and basil, a little bit of balsamic vinegar and olive oil. And it's a nice fresh salad that's often enjoyed in the summertime. But today I'm going to show you a little heart-healthy spin on our panzanella salad by incorporating some lean protein with our salmon. And we're also going to use some things to kind of make it a delicious meal any time of year instead of just in the summertime. So we are going to get started. And I did hear the question about if you have a fish allergy. So as we go through the presentation today, I'll make sure to incorporate some alternative ingredients as we go along. So if you're interested in this recipe but don't really like fish or can't do fish for whatever reason, there's many other options for putting together a delicious panzanella recipe. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is put together a little bit of a marinade for our fish. So we're going to be using some shortcut ingredients, in our recipe today. And those shortcut ingredients are going to be some sun-dried tomatoes in olive oil, which is one of my favorite ingredients. We'll talk about a little bit more in a minute. And we're also going to be using some jarred artichoke hearts. So we'll start off with our sun-dried tomatoes. So sun-dried tomatoes in olive oil, these are julienne cut. So you will see, I'm going to measure out about a half of a cup of these. So you'll see they're already cut for us. So we don't have to do any of that work. I'm just going to measure out about a half of a cup. So these are packed in some extra virgin olive oil, a little bit of avocado oil. So both nice heart-healthy oils. And there are some seasonings in here, so some herbs and some spices. So in this jar, we have a lot of flavor and some great nutrition as well. So lots of flavor in both the tomatoes and the oil, because they both kind of marinate each other. You'll notice that there's a kind of a reddish color to the oil, which you'll see in a little bit. And that's because it's been marinating with those tomatoes. So our tomatoes themselves are very flavorful from those oils and those herbs, but then we also want to utilize that oil that's in there that has a lot of flavor as well. So I'm just going to take my oil and I'm going to place a little bit into my measuring cup here. It doesn't have to be a perfect amount, but we're going to take probably about a quarter of a cup, just reserve that. And you can kind of see that nice dark color from those tomatoes in there. See that in the camera. And some of those herbs and spices. Now, one thing that I really love about this product in particular is they don't add any salt to it. It's a very low sodium ingredient, but it's full of a lot of flavor. So just that, good quality olive oil and the herbs and the spices add so much flavor without utilizing extra salt. So very nice and low sodium, but lots of flavor. All right, so we're going to put those aside for a sec. Put those over here. And then we're going to grab our marinated artichoke hearts. So these are just artichoke hearts that are marinated Very similar, a little bit of olive oil and then also some vinegar. So that's going to give a little bit of a kick to it. There are some herbs and spices in here, and this one does contain a little bit of salt, but it's still considered per serving a low sodium ingredient. So not a lot of salt at all. So for these artichoke hearts, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to drain them a little bit. So we'll get some of these big artichoke hearts out of here. I'm going to use about half of this jar. And then some of that liquid has just come right out of the colander. And we have this nice flavorful brine here for us. Nice flavorful low sodium brine. All right, so we're going to put that to the side and we're going to get started on our salmon now. So I just have about a pound of salmon here. The salmon that I just got right at our local ShopRite, and at the store, I asked them to just take the skin off for me for this recipe. You don't have to have the skin cut off. If you don't like the skin, it's nice and easy to ask them to just take that off for you so it's easier to prepare. And the reason that I have it skinless today is because we're going to dice it up into little dices. So I just have a sharp knife here. I'm going to cut the salmon just into little cubes that are going to go onto a baking sheet. So this is a great example of a sheet pan meal. So as we're talking about, simple recipes, things that are quick and easy, I love using sheet pan meals to create some nice flavorful and quick meals, especially for my weeknight. We're going to put 2 of our major ingredients right on the sheet pan. They're going to go into the oven together, and everything is going to cook up nice and quickly in about 10 minutes. So we're going to be using the salmon today because it is nice and heart healthy. The American Heart Association recommends eating about 2 servings of fatty fish per week, and salmon is a really great choice. I know through my cooking demonstrations here at the center, I found that some people are really comfortable eating fish and cooking with fish. Others don't really know how to cook it, or maybe don't know, how to flavor it up. And others, just maybe aren't really that into fish, and that's okay too. I do like this recipe. It flavors up the salmon really nicely. So if you're new to salmon, this is a nice recipe to kind of ease you in. But if you're just not into salmon, that's okay too. We can substitute the salmon for a nice lean protein like chicken. Or if you wanted to do something that's more plant-based, you could do white beans or chickpeas would be great as well. All right, so my salmon is on my sheet pan here. So I actually have a little less than a pound. I have a little bit more in the oven that is ready to go nice and cooked. So you'll see what the serving looks like. And then I'm just gonna take a little bit of that oil from the sun-dried tomatoes, drizzle that right on top of my salmon, and then just a spoonful or 2 of that seasoning or the liquid from the artichoke hearts. And that's just going to be our little seasoning. So we don't have to break out the spice cabinet or all of our oils and vinegars, but you can if you want to. So if you're not a fan of the flavor of the marinated artichoke hearts, then you can use a canned artichoke heart, or you can skip them all together. And instead of using that brine, you can just use a little bit of a balsamic vinegar or a white wine vinegar or something like that. I'm really big on using what you have on hand and what you like the flavor of. So, if these exact ingredients aren't up your alley, you can kind of use your imagination and see what works for you. All right, so that's the salmon. So that's step number 1 for our recipe today. And now I'm going to move over to our bread. So as mentioned, panzanella salad is kind of like a toasted bread salad. So we're going to heart healthify our bread today by choosing a whole grain bread. So this is a nice whole grain bread, again, that we just got at our local supermarket. So it's whole wheat. I did check the label, and it has a couple of grams of fiber per serving, which is a good sign. Fiber is a great ingredient or a great thing to incorporate into your diet, whether you are trying to make your heart more healthy, you're trying to manage your weight, trying to improve your digestion, or manage your blood sugar levels. Fiber can help with all of those things. So choosing whole grains and incorporating them into our meals is a great way to increase our health and our nutrition. So what I've done is I've diced up our bread, just like I diced up about the same size as our pieces of salmon. And I'm just going to place them right on that other side of the baking sheet. So for our bread, I'm just going to take a little bit of extra virgin olive oil that I have in this little squeeze bottle. I'm going to drizzle it right on top. If you want to season it from here with a little bit of pepper or salt, you can do that. Or if you have something like an Italian seasoning that you'd like to add to your bread cubes, you can do that as well. We do get a lot of flavor from everything else that we're putting in here. So I tend to just leave it plain and then just, enjoy the rest of the flavors that put this salad together. All right. So now all we have to do is place this into the oven. So I have my oven preheated to 400 degrees. So I'm going to pop this in, and this should take about 10 minutes to cook up. So, and that's pretty quick, right? So in that next 10 minutes, we can put the rest of our salad together. But with the power of TV magic, we're going to fast forward 10 minutes, and we have our cooked salmon and bread cubes right here and ready to go. So you can get a look at what that looks like. So our salmon is cooked. It is nice and flaky. If you're unsure of if your salmon is cooked or not, you can use a meat thermometer to check the temperature. The internal temperature of any fish should be 145 degrees. So if you're not sure, you're new to cooking fish, just use one of those meat thermometers and make sure that it has reached that temperature of 145 degrees, and then you're good to go. Our bread is nice and crispy, so we've created these little croutons that are nice and crisp. And then we're ready to start to build that whole salad together. So I'm going to pop my baking sheet over to the side, and we're going to just grab a bowl. Actually, let's start by chopping up some of our veggies. Just got to grab my veggie cutting board over here. Put that to the side. And we have our artichoke hearts we're going to go back to. So I'm just going to pop them right onto my my cutting board. I'm going to grab a clean knife, and I'm just going to give them a rough chop. That's it. So artichoke hearts, very delicious and also very good for us. So they are filled with fiber. So again, fiber can do many things for our body. In terms of heart health, fiber can help to manage our cholesterol levels. And these artichoke hearts are a really great thing. There's many varieties that you can choose from out there. Again, we're using a marinated one today, but you can use canned artichoke hearts and just drain and rinse them, or even frozen works as well. So those are our artichoke hearts. Artichoke hearts were also high in magnesium, folate, potassium, and vitamin K. So lots of great nutrition there. The next thing that we have are some fresh cherry tomatoes. So I'm just going to cut up a few. I've cut up a few already just to make sure that we stay within the right timeline. I like to use cherry tomatoes of different colors. I like these little, I'll grab some of the yellow ones. I love these colorful ones. They add just a little bit more color and pizzazz to our recipe. So I have about 1.5 cups of them all sliced up here and ready to go. And then we have our sun-dried tomatoes that I reserved before, and I'm just going to grab a handful of basil as well. So I have just a nice fresh handful of basil, and I'm just going to slice that up. So grabbing these leaves, and I just kind of place them in a pile. These are nice Jersey fresh basil today they had at the grocery store. All right, and now I am going to give it a little slice. Doesn't have to be perfect. The basil is so flavorful. Any type of herb that you like will be good in here. Basil is really kind of the classic for a panzanella salad, but if you happen to have fresh parsley on hand, that would go really well also. I love herbs for heart health because they really help to add so much flavor to our dishes without needing to add any more sodium. So you can really get so much flavor. If you're someone who's usually grabbing the salt shaker or salting your food as you go, think about some ways that you can incorporate some other herbs and spices. And they don't have to be fresh herbs and spices. They can be, if you don't have fresh basil on hand, but you have a little bit of dried Italian seasoning, that's fine too. It still adds a lot of flavor, again, without having to use that salt. All right, we have all our ingredients ready to go. We're just going to grab a nice bowl and mix everything together. So I'm going to start off by grabbing my salmon and my breadcrumbs, my bread cubes, and I'm just going to pop them right into the bowl. So these are still warm. I like to serve the salad warm, but you can also serve it cold. I've also had it just for leftovers, and so it's really good the next day also. Our bread cubes are nice and crunchy, nice and whole grain. And then we're going to add in those sun-dried tomatoes, making a mess over here. And we're going to add in our artichoke hearts. One thing about the tomatoes, so we have two different types of tomatoes going on here today, our sun-dried tomatoes and our fresh cherry tomatoes. Tomatoes are full of vitamin C. Also for heart health, they have an antioxidant called lycopene. Lycopene helps to protect our heart. So it's really a great, these tomatoes are a great way to get more of that lycopene into our diet. Okay, so then next, I'm just going to add in that fresh basil, and we're just going to give this a nice little toss. And so from here, you can also go back to those reserved seasonings that we used from the sun-dried tomato oil and the artichoke heart oil. And you can just put those as like a little drizzle over your salad. So I have them kind of mixed together. So instead of, a salad dressing, we're just going to use a little bit of that oil and that nice kind of vinegar flavor from the marinated artichokes. And we're just going to give that a little drizzle right over our salad. And there's just so much flavor packed in here. And it looks really nice too. We always talk about eating a rainbow of colors of fruits and vegetables. And just with our tomatoes and our artichoke hearts, we have a nice amount of color here. We have a nice balanced meal. We have the whole grains that help to give us energy. We have our our fatty fish to help to give us omega-3 fatty acids that can help to lower our cholesterol levels, also help to reduce inflammation in the body. And then we have all of our veggies in there as well. So a little bit of balance right in this bowl. And that is our recipe for our salmon panzanella salad. I hope you enjoyed. You will be receiving the recipe if you haven't already. So if you have any questions about it when you see it, please feel free to reach out and let us know if you have questions, or if you try it and you really like it, we'd love to know that too. To see more programs like this, you can check out our calendar of events for here at the LiveWell Center. We have our programs here in person, so you can actually come in and you can taste everything that we make. But if you can't come in person, we also do the majority of our cooking programs virtually as well. So you can always log on and join us virtually. And thank you so much for having me this morning.
Okay, well, thank you, Jennifer, for that great presentation. That does look absolutely delicious.
Thank you.
I did have a few questions come through the chat that I'd like to present to you.
Sure.
The first one is, what other types of fish can be used in this recipe?
Sure. So any type of kind of like just thicker fish. So something like a cod would work pretty well in here. So anything that you can dice up into those cubes. So cod would work well. Mahi-mahi would be pretty good. And something like sea bass would be a good option as well. I'm trying to think of the other one. I think those would be the main ones that I would put in there instead.
Okay, thank you. Along those lines, if you were vegetarian, what else could you put in the salad besides fish?
Yes, so instead of the fish, I would recommend a cannellini bean. So you could do that's like a white kidney bean. So you could do a like drain and rinse a can or two of those white beans, and you could mix that in. Those flavor that would go really, really well with all of these flavors. Another one would be chickpeas would be really good too. And you can actually roast the chickpeas. So if you want it to kind of follow the same method where we marinated the fish in a little bit of that oil and that vinegar mixture from the artichoke hearts, you can actually toss the drained and rinsed chickpeas with those oils and place them on your baking sheet and bake them along with the bread, and they'll toast up and warm up a little bit. And they're really nice and like marinated beans. So that would work really well also.
Okay. One person had a question about the parchment paper. Do you need the parchment paper? Is there a benefit for using the parchment paper? Why use the parchment paper for the recipe?
Sure. So parchment paper is, I just prefer it. It helps to keep the pan a little bit more clean. I also think that it helps with even roasting as well. But you don't have to use it. You can actually, the original recipe actually calls for foil, so you can do that instead. Or you can just leave you don't have to put anything on the pan except maybe a little drizzle of olive oil so things don't stick. The main thing with the parchment paper is it's very non-stick. So especially if you have veggies or any type of meat that sort of like caramelizes and can get stuck to the pan, parchment paper really helps to make everything non-stick. So that's one of the main reasons I use it. And then it just kind of keeps the pan a little bit more clean, easy to wash. It's not going to keep it completely clean where you don't have to wash your pan, but it just makes cleanup a little bit easier.
Okay. Another question that came through was, can you use keto bread instead of the whole grain bread?
Sure. Yeah, you could use any type of bread that you'd like to, as long as it can, you can kind of like cube it up and it'll toast up in the oven. So if you had like a light bread that you'd like to use or a low carb bread, that would be fine. You could also just leave the bread out if you really want to avoid the bread altogether. So you can mix in your vegetables, your salmon or your beans if you're doing something like that. And you can just, make it more of a vegetable and protein salad, and that would be totally fine as well. You could even add in other vegetables. So instead, maybe instead of the bread, you put in some roasted zucchini, or maybe some roasted squash or something like that. So you can really make it your own. It doesn't have to be bread. That's the classic panzanella salad, but you can totally leave that out, or again, substitute it for a different vegetable if you'd like to.
Okay. Now, in this recipe, you use the brine and the oil that's usually in the jars.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people say you should discard those as opposed to using them because of the salt intake. Should someone who's watching their salt intake not use as much, or how would you then use it for the recipe?
So for these are actually very low sodium. So I would suggest looking at the nutrition facts label and seeing how much sodium is being added to them. So the thing that I really like about the sun-dried tomatoes in oil is for a serving, there's only 5 milligrams of sodium. So it's actually very low. When you read the nutrition facts labels, they don't even add salt to it. So whatever the sodium in there is just natural from the tomatoes and things like that. So in this case, I like to use the brine. It's kind of like a shortcut so that you can use all of that. And also we're getting the benefit of the olive oil that's in here. We're not discarding that olive oil. So I would say read the labels and see what's in there. Not every jar that you pick up is going to be low in sodium. So we want to keep that in mind. We want to read our labels. Keep in mind that if we're following a low sodium diet, we should be taking in somewhere between 1,500 to 2,000 milligrams. In general, other canned vegetables, so these are like specially seasoned and they happen to not use a lot of salt in these formulas. Our general canned vegetables, and beans do tend to have more sodium in the brine that's in there. So those we would recommend, like if we're going to use a chickpea, we would say drain and rinse that, and that helps to reduce about 30% of the sodium in there. So it is really like looking at those labels and seeing what's out there. But I do like to, to let people know when there are some great things out there that don't have a lot of sodium and we can get a lot of flavor from them, and just kind of enhance our nutrition and our flavors for our food.
Okay, there was just a question, if you can put the brand name of the artichokes and the sun-dried tomatoes that you used in the chat so people can know
Sure.
who they are.
Sure. I'm going to actually, I'm going to send that over, and also just wanted to thank our community health manager, Gina, who's in the corner. No one can see her here, but she's doing all the camera work. So I'm going to pass these over to her, and then she'll put those in the chat for me. Thanks, Gina. All right.
There was one more question about what spices are good for heart health.
What spices? So there's a lot of different herbs and spices. So they all pretty much have similar benefits. So if you think about these like green leafy herbs and spices, they're very similar to our vegetables, where they're going to have some vitamin C, they're going to have some potassium, maybe some B vitamins, all which help with our body's overall, functioning and our heart health. And then some of our herbs and spices, things like turmeric and ginger, and some of the herbs that are out there grown in our garden, can have or may have some anti-inflammatory effects, which can help, especially with that chronic low-grade inflammation, can help with protecting our bodies from damage to our heart and our organs and things like that. So all of the spices, I think, can be beneficial. Some of the ones that have been studied for more of that anti-inflammatory effect would be things like turmeric and ginger, garlic as well. But I think variety is key. And then again, they all can contribute to heart health just because they're so flavorful. And when we're adding a lot of herbs and spices to our dishes, we don't have to add quite as much salt to get that good flavor.
Okay. So just so you guys who wanted to know, the name of the artichokes and the sun-dried tomatoes are in the chat. The other question I had was, you spoke about, too much salt. What do you consider? What's the threshold for salt in, marinades or whatever that you should be looking for? What's the number? Is there a number that you should be looking for less than this particular number or something?
Yeah. Yes. So that's a good question. So again, when we tell someone, you should be following a low sodium diet, that means about 1,500 to 2,000 milligrams per day. So when we look at our nutrition facts labels, we can use a couple of numbers, a couple of ranges to help us determine if a food fits into our program or our plan. So in general, we would consider 140 milligrams or less a low sodium food. So if you pick up a jar and you see like the sun-dried tomatoes, you can see that per serving it is 5 milligrams. You know that that's a very low contributing amount of sodium for your diet, so that would be good. However, you do want to take into consideration that portion size too. So just make sure that if the portion size is about a quarter of a cup, you're like sticking to about a quarter of a cup or so. Or if you're doing more than that, then that would contribute a little bit more sodium. But in general, 140 milligrams or less is what we consider low sodium. And then over like 350 we would consider higher sodium, or just something that you have to watch a little bit more. Where we get a lot of sodium, a lot of times can be from things like canned soups, which again, going back to that portion size, 1 can of soup is typically 2 cups or 2 servings of soup. And if you look at that nutrition facts label, a lot of times even just 1 cup, so half of that can, is about 1,000 milligrams. So having that entire can of soup might give us about 2,000 milligrams right there. So it can add up really quickly when we are using those jarred, canned, and even some of our frozen, more highly processed foods. So just reading those labels and kind of knowing those ranges can be really helpful. The other thing you can look at is the percentages. So on the side of the nutrition facts label, it's the percent daily value. It says percent DV. If a percentage for sodium is 5% or lower, we consider that a low sodium product. If it's 20% or higher, we consider that high sodium. So that can be helpful as well, to know how much you're taking in from those canned foods, because they are, they're convenient, and I always hate to tell people not to use them at all, but we have to look at the overall picture and what the rest of our day is looking like as well. So if that canned soup is something that is really helping us, get that meal for lunch or whatever it is, maybe it can fit, but we want to look at the other meals that we're having and make sure that we're not taking in too much sodium for our overall day.
Okay, there were a couple more questions that came through. Someone wants to know, what about beets? Are beets a good vegetable to eat? I mean, some people say they're high in sugar or carbohydrates. Is that a good vegetable to eat?
Yeah, beets are really good. So they will have a little bit more of a starch than something like broccoli will, but they're not as high in starch as something like a potato. So they're great to incorporate. You can just see from their deep color that there's a lot of nutrition and antioxidants in there. So they are and there's a lot of fiber as well. So that's one thing to keep in mind if there is a food that's a little bit higher in starch. If it also comes along with fiber, that can help with our blood sugar levels and keeping them more steady. But again, beets are not a very high source of sugar, not a high source of carbohydrate. So I wouldn't consider it like a starchy vegetable. It might just be a little bit higher than something like broccoli. But in general, very healthy, great to incorporate.
Okay. The last question is, how much protein is recommended for a vegetarian diet?
Okay. So our protein needs are going to vary depending on each individual person. And it depends on your goals and what else you have going on. So generally we would say, and I don't expect you all to calculate this right now, but generally we would say 0.8 grams per kilogram of our body weight, which I don't know if you can know how to convert your pounds and kilograms. But generally for, a lot of women, that's going to be somewhere around like 50 grams of protein. But again, it's going to depend on your genetics, your height, your weight, your activity level, and things like that. Most people can meet their protein needs pretty easily, even with a vegetarian diet. We just want to look at where we're getting that protein from when we are eating vegetarian. So our vegetarian sources would be things like beans, nuts, and seeds. You can use things like tofu. You can use, depending on how strict you are, you can use things like, some vegetarians will use dairy, like yogurts and things like that. If you're using something like a Greek yogurt, that right there, a 6 ounce has about 15 grams or 14 grams of protein. So just by incorporating that protein throughout the day, even if it's plant-based, many of us can meet those protein needs. Most meat-eating people exceed the recommended amount of protein pretty easily. And that's okay. We can have more than that 0.8 grams per kilogram of our body weight. But it's, most people can go over that pretty easily just from eating meats. But if you're not sure exactly how much you need and you're especially like struggling to take in protein, I would recommend reaching out to your doctor or a dietitian to actually get that number of exactly how much you need, and then look at those sources that you're typically taking in and see where you can increase here and there.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It was a great presentation. The food looked delicious, and thank you for answering all the questions.
Of course. Thank you all again for having me.
And turn it back over to Ruth Ann.
All right. Thank you, Jennifer and Dr. Randall. Another round of applause once again. Loved the demonstration kitchen and your presentation. Absolutely wonderful. And appreciate the reminder on checking nutrition fact labels. So important. And wonderful recipe selection, as I do love salmon. So I don't know about the rest of you, and sorry for those of you who are allergic, but I love it. So great. This brings us to the close of today's program. I trust that you have enjoyed our program today as much as I did. And importantly, I hope that you've captured the takeaways to get back to the basics of heart health and stay committed to how important you are. You are worth 1% and more. So please ensure to look at the heart health risk factors in your control and make daily modifications accordingly to minimize those risks and live a heart healthy lifestyle. Once again, a great big thank you to all of our presenters and program participants today. On behalf of today's event co-sponsors, the Central Jersey Club, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, Monmouth County Alumni Chapter, and Concerned Black Nurses of Central New Jersey, we thank all of you for your attendance today. Please stay connected with us. If you follow the Central Jersey Club on YouTube, you may also find the recording of today's session. So as we depart, please enjoy the rest of your day and may you all be heart healthy. Good day, folks. Have a good one.